Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated. So excited today to be speaking with actress Alexandra Paul. So welcome, Alexandra.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to have you on the show. So welcome.
Thank you.
And it's not really fair. I mean, obviously you're an actress, but you're so much more than that. You're so busy. I don't know how you find time to do anything. So I really appreciate you, fitting us in a little bit.
That's nice. Thank you.
So I wanted to start here because I'm very curious about how people got started. So tell me a little bit about what got you into acting, what made you want to become an entertainer?
I did not have plans to become an entertainer. I went to a high school where everybody in my class went to college, except for I ended up not going to college. I was accepted at Stanford University and had really big plans to be an environmental scientist because the environment was something very near and dear to me. Back in 1981, when I graduated, environmental science wasn't really a major. I had to write it in on all my applications, but I took a year off before going to college and I modeled in New York. And it was during that time when I auditioned for a TV movie called Paper Dolls, which was about models, and they were looking for an unknown young woman to play the lead, one of the two leads, and they cast me. So I had a little acting experience because my modeling agency had asked me to go to acting class, and I actually loved it. It was like my whole perspective on the world changed. I was just amazed that I didn't know what creativity was. My parents were more people who went to museums. We looked at art. We didn't really make art. And so going to acting class was very freeing. And I was also dating a man who was an actor at the time. And so I started thinking about being an actor. Yeah. But I still was planning to go to college and everything. And then when I auditioned for this role for Paper Dolls, a TV movie, an ABC movie of the week, which back in the 80s, the movies of the week were a big deal.
I remember.
We don't have them anymore.
Movies of the week. Yeah.
So yes, I was cast in that. I was flown to California. I shot the movie. I loved it. I loved shooting it. The movie ended up being one of the top 5 TV movies of 1982. And so I decided not to go to college. I decided to stay in Los Angeles and see if my career would move forward. I was, get this, and I think I was smart to do this, but I thought that if I returned to LA after college at 21, I'd be too old. So, but actually it was a smart move for me because I worked on some terrific movies in the next couple of years. And because I was 18, 19, 20, but I looked younger and there were a lot of high school things coming out. It was a good time for me.
It seems like an easier entrance into acting than is normal.
Oh, yes. I was extremely lucky. I could say. So where it got harder along the way, but in the beginning, yes, I didn't even know, when you're young, you don't even know how easy you have it. Right. You just go along with the flow, and
it's probably a good thing because it keeps you from getting like overwhelmed, or kind of, you don't realize how big the moment is sometimes when you're younger. So that's probably a good thing.
Right. I definitely didn't know that it wasn't normal for someone to all of a sudden star in a TV movie alongside Daryl Hannah and Eric Stoltz and
our good
Joan
friend
Collins
Collins was in there, but our good friend Mark Singer.
Oh yes, Mark. In there. He was lovely, wonderful. Oh, you know him. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to talk with him a couple of years ago and got kind of close. I was a big fan. He was so big in the 80s, and so that was one that I was like, well, I'm gonna reach out and see if I can get him for the program. He was nice enough to come on, and then it was during the pandemic, so it wasn't a whole lot going on. So we got a little bit close there where we were able to correspond where maybe he wasn't as busy as he normally would be. So it was kind of nice. But I remember Paper Dolls. When that came out, I was probably in middle school, I would say. But I remember because we'd watch it because it was movies of the week, big deal. So, that was one, there wasn't, I guess there was cable, but it was in its early stages. So there wasn't a lot on cable yet. So the networks, I mean, those were big deals when they came out with the movies.
And there were only, 3 or 4 networks plus maybe an independent station. And that TV movie became a television series. But I and Daryl and Eric chose not to be on it because back then television was not, I wanted to do movies. And if you were in television, it was hard for you to migrate to movies. Now it's a stepping stone to movies and back. Movies are a stepping stone to television.
Isn't that funny? Because I do remember that you had like legit television stars, but they didn't do movies and vice versa.
I believe, and this is my theory, is that Michael J. Fox changed it when he was starring on his television series and then was cast in Back to the Future. Right. And it became such a hit. And then he resumed his television series, I think, afterwards. And then George Clooney he went from TV, being a TV star to a movie star. So George didn't wander back into TV, but Michael J. Fox definitely gave legitimacy to television success.
Yeah, you're right. And he did that for a while. It wasn't just Back to the Future. He did several movies, but kept doing television. The whole time.
Now the biggest film stars want to do television. They want to do series. Yeah. Series are so much, they're different now. They're shorter. They're only 10 episodes usually, 8 to 12. And instead of 22 a year. And the writing is so excellent. And also a lot of actors want that steadiness if they have family and things like that, especially if it shoots near where they live. So there's just a lot of advantages now to television. But back then, I don't think people realized the prejudice against television. So I turned down that series. Yes.
I had forgotten that was even a series until you said it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. What's your preference now? Do you prefer the movies or do you prefer television series?
I like both. I really, so in the early 1990s, I said that yes to Baywatch. And I was concerned because of that move from movies to television. But my manager said, Alexandra, you should do Baywatch. It's an international series, and a lot of the films that you do, I was doing a lot of independent films, are financed by Germany. This has also changed now, by the way, and Germany loves to watch. So that was my thinking, strategic thinking on why I said yes to Baywatch. Well, once I started shooting Baywatch, I thought to myself, wow, I love shooting television series. I love the pace, so much faster than movies. No spending tons of time dealing with lighting and waiting in your trailer until they get the set ready. No, you're moving really fast, so much more creative. And then also being able to stay with a character longer is a lot of fun and can stretch you as an actor. It can also put you in a box, I guess, if you stay too long. But, and also just going to the set every day and seeing the same cast. It's just.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to do that for 5 years, which is a pretty good run. And I'm sure you probably could have stayed longer. I'm guessing that was a choice to step away at that time.
It was a choice to step away. Every year, my agent would sit me down and say, you should leave that show. And I would say, no, I love shooting that show. I don't want you to get typecast. He would say, Alexandra, I don't want you to get typecast. Well, everybody gets in a typecast in some way. I said, I love doing that show. Plus, we only shoot 5 months a year. And so I have, 7 months to do other things. Plus, I had a really liberal contract where if I got another movie, which I did several times, they would let me go and shoot it within. So there was one season where they said, I think my character went to Australia or something with her boyfriend. Well, that was because I was actually going to Croatia to shoot something with Pierce Brosnan. So, yeah.
Oh, what was that movie? I remember that.
That was a movie. That was a sequel to another movie I'd done with Pierce Brosnan, and I shot Death Train with him right before I started Baywatch. I remember when they shot the photos, I had bruises all over me, and they were like, "We have to cover these bruises because we're shooting, publicity stills, and you're in a bathing suit." So, but it was pretty. I had to do a lot of stunts, so I was pretty bruised up. And then we did the sequel a couple years later. It was called Night Train. It was on video. It's called Detonator 1 and 2.
Yeah, I couldn't remember, but I remember watching those as they came out, and I knew it was around that time. So yeah, pretty good. Yeah, you were so busy during that time period. You were popping up all over the place in different things that I like to watch. And of course, Baywatch just kept getting bigger. You know, there was a time period there for a few years where Baywatch was on several times a day. It was like it was all over the place.
You know, I never had a television, and so I didn't really know where I was. I watch entertainment on my laptop, the same thing I'm talking to you on. I have no fancy entertainment system. So I didn't have a television back then. So I had a monitor so I could watch DVDs, or actually back then it was tapes, sorry.
Tapes, yeah.
Tapes.
VHS tapes.
Yes, I wasn't really that aware of what was on and things. Here in the United States, Baywatch was looked on with quite a lot of contempt, is probably maybe a strong word, but ridicule maybe is a better word for it.
Kind of funny because it also had this huge fan base, but then you had another section of the population that was definitely looked at as not a serious show. Let's say it that way.
And we knew it wasn't a serious show too. But yeah, you're right. A lot of people watched it, but in America, at least, people wouldn't admit they watched it. It was so fluffy. But around the world, people unabashedly adored the show. And they were not, they never did the disclaimer, which is I got a lot when I was here, when people come up to me and go, "Are you on Baywatch?" I don't watch it, but are you on Baywatch? My husband would stand by and he'd go, "1 billion people a week watch the show, so it's surprising that you wouldn't watch it." He'd be really terse about it because he felt they were so rude, immediately saying, "I don't watch it," but
Yeah, I never really got that. I mean, I thought one of the great parts about the show was it didn't seem to take itself too seriously, but you had a group of people that seemed like had really good chemistry and got along, because you can kind of tell sometimes if people are not getting along very well, even if they're acting. But it seemed like they got along. It was a fun show. It had action. It was kind of funny. Tongue in cheek at times. I never really got what the issues were with Baywatch. I thought it was great.
Well, thank you. I think people now, it's a really cool show to have been on, by the way. People now don't say that anymore about the fact that they don't try and distance themselves from it, from ever watching it.
It's kind of tame when you look back at it now.
It's gotten cool now that it's 30 years old.
Yeah, I get that piece. I'm very geeky. And back when I was growing up, being nerdy or geeky and stuff, not necessarily a good thing. Now it's very in. Everybody's a little bit nerdy. You and
Baywatch have a lot in common. Then you finally came into style.
That's right. Finally in style.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there a person on Baywatch? I know you get along well with the majority of the cast, probably still, but was there a person at the time that you're like, I don't know about this person, but now maybe that years later you're like, that person's okay? Maybe I was wrong.
Everyone was wonderful, truly. So yeah, and now I've gotten to know a lot of them even better, like Jeremy Jackson as he's grown up, and people who weren't even on the show when I was on the show, like Erica Eleniak, who was there the first season. And
Erica came on our show.
Yeah, she's a lovely, lovely person. Yeah. And Michael Bergen, who was on Baywatch Hawaii and some of after. So I know a lot of the actors. I think when you have that in common, where a show that is so known and iconic in American entertainment television history, you kind of bond no matter, even if you didn't work with them at the time. So
yeah. Well, and now you've got, do you do conventions? Because I'm assuming you run into these people sometimes at different events and shows over the years.
I do conventions, mostly horror for Christine, which was my first
Oh,
feature
yeah.
film.
Yeah. I remember, Christy. I saw that one at the theater. Very proud of that.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it came out in 1983, and yeah, it's almost 40 years old, that one.
Yeah, I know. It's wonderful because the 80s were so terrific, but a little bit like, oh my gosh, it was 40 years ago.
I know. It's funny. I never thought I'd be this person, but here I am.
I'm pretty sure I had to sneak into Christine. It was R-rated, wasn't it?
I think so, for language.
Yeah,
probably, because there was some stronger language. Yeah, but it's a film that's really held up, and it actually is the film for which I get the most residuals. A lot of films don't pay residuals to actors; they just don't, because they're not honest. But that was a studio film, and they do pay residuals. So I get probably more residuals from Christine than any other project. It plays a lot still.
It does.
I mean, I get a lot of residuals from Baywatch because I did, over 100 episodes.
5 seasons of it.
Yeah, but yeah, in terms of just the single thing, it definitely has legs.
Yeah, I definitely. Christine was probably, other than Paper Dolls, probably the one that I remember you the most from early. With that, because
those were my first job, and then Christine was pretty much my second full job. I did a movie in between, after Paper Dolls, with Christy McNichol, another name from the past.
Yeah.
She starred in Family in the 70s, the series Family. And that film was halted midway through. And so then we came back the following year. We didn't finish it all at once.
Finished it up.
But it ended up being finished, and it's called I Won't Dance, I think is the name of the film.
Was it you? Were you the one that wouldn't dance?
No, I was the mean, jealous girlfriend of Michael Onkeen, who I then worked with later on a pilot called Green Sails, and so it's fun, kind of, when you're around a long time, you get to work with people more than once and get to know them.
I know you've had such a great career. You could play. I've said this to a few actors who've had on the show, but you could do like 7 or 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but with Alexandra.
Maybe. I've never played it, but yes.
I think you could, because you've worked with so many people, and the people that you've worked with have worked with so many people. I think we could do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've mostly, worked in a lot of independent movies and television, but I have done some A-list films with like Tom Hanks and Kevin Costner and Dan Aykroyd. So I probably could get even to the high ranks of Hollywood with 6 degrees just through them.
Kevin Costner.
That was American Flyers.
American Flyers, yeah. I'm such a big Kevin Costner fan. That's an underrated one, I think.
It is a thoroughly underrated film. The year it came out, we shot it in 84, so it must have come out in 85. The year it came out, I think the studio had Thunderdome, and they wanted to promote that instead. That was the scuttlebutt I heard,
Yeah. Well, I guess I can see that, but I always liked American Flyers. I thought it was a really good film. And I do remember you in Piranhas.
Piranha.
I couldn't remember if it was more than one piranha. I guess that's it. If you say piranha, that's more than
there
one.
were a lot of piranhas in the movie, but it's called Piranha, and it was a remake of the movie that John Sayles wrote, whom I adore John Sayles. So I was just so thrilled to be in a movie that was a remake of one of his, done by Roger Corman, who is the low budget king. And he loved to repurpose his scripts, because that way he could, make a movie on very little money without having to pay. So we even used the same footage of Piranhas was used, even though it was 10 years, 15 years. No, it was probably more.
Wasn't it a TV movie?
It might have been. It was a TV movie. It wasn't a series, and it wasn't a feature. Yeah, so it was a TV movie. Ended up on cable. That's
where I think I watched it, was on cable.
Probably, yeah. So that was kind of neat. That was kind of neat.
You were on another series that at the time, there was a lot of us watching it, but we wouldn't admit to watching it for whatever dumb reason we had at the time. But that was Melrose Place, and you were on right near the end of it.
I was in the
Not
last
not that I watched
episodes.
it or anything.
That was a series that for your younger audience, people would get on the phone and watch it together,
Yes,
or they
yes.
had parties watching it. And
That's
my
what we
friend
were doing.
Daphne Zuniga was on that show and was terrific in it.
Yeah, she was terrific. Yeah, that's
but
how we used to do it. We'd get together in a group and watch it. But it was so weird because none of us would really, we wouldn't admit to watching it, even though we knew we were watching it because we were watching it together.
But we glad to watch it together. Yeah, it was a very enjoyable show. And I was happy to be on it. You know, I'm a pretty earnest person in real life, and so especially in my 20s and 30s. Now I'm older and I'm not nearly as earnest, but people were always surprised that I would be on this really fluffy fare. But I have to say, as an actor, I just loved it. I mean, it's not easy as an actor to make writing that isn't the best good. And that is something, you know, maybe even De Niro couldn't do. But I think I did, and my co-stars did also, you know, because we were used to that. And also, it's just so darn fun to play these characters who are pretty out there. And especially on Melrose Place, they would change from bad to good to loving to, you know, sleeping with your brother. I mean, you just didn't know what was going to happen. So that was a lot of fun.
I miss the watch parties. You know, I miss getting together to watch a show or to watch a series finale. You know, that was a big thing in the 80s and 90s. You get together and kind of watch the end of a show, have a party around. I miss that. We don't really do that anymore.
Yeah, I guess not. Well, especially with the pandemic, but now everyone's in their own silos, and there's so much to choose from that people aren't watching. Not nearly as many people are watching your favorite show.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's so it's like back then, you either watched it when it came out or you waited till the summer when maybe they showed the rerun. There was no you didn't have the option.
I know people have it so easy now. They, you know.
I mean, you look at the numbers watching back then, you know, shows now, they don't get anywhere close to the audience that some of the big shows back then got, because you only got the one chance to watch it.
Well, there is a real crisis in Hollywood now trying to deal with that, because the budgets of shows are, you know, they might be as big, but they don't get the audience share. So therefore they don't get the advertising. And they're trying to figure that out. Netflix now is really working to, it's putting on big budget series now to get those viewers, and they all are, to get the viewers so they can get a base and get a reputation. But I think they're putting themselves in a financial hole for now, because they're not getting the eyeballs that those same shows costing that same amount used to get.
And there's so many options out there now. I mean, and good options. You know, it's not like there's just a lot of options. There's a lot of good options out there.
And television is now just really respected. And frankly, as someone who never had a TV and whose mother was, you know, we didn't have really a TV growing up even.
Yeah.
I like television more. If you give me a choice of an 8-episode series and a movie, I'll usually pick the 8-episode series.
Right.
Yeah.
You watch it all in one sitting.
And yes, I don't wait. I can't remember what happened 5 days ago. I don't want to have to wait a week to watch the next installment.
No, I'm kind of torn, because I binge like everybody else does, but I do kind of miss the days where you had a whole week to kind of anticipate the next episode. But
there's something, I'm reading a book called, I think it's called Dopamine Nation, and it talks about how now we get everything we want when we want it. And so we actually are a little dulled. Our lives are a little more dulled because of that, because our pleasure sensors and our they're not activated, because our pain sensors aren't activated. So that pain of you having to wait gives you more pleasure when you actually see it.
That makes sense.
Week.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So what was the last show that you binged?
Oh, well, okay. I'm watching the morning show right now.
Oh, yeah.
Apple.
Yeah,
But
we've
I
had a
don't know
few
if
of those actors on. That's a good show.
It is a good show. It is a good show. And the last show that I would say before that was Sex Education. Have you seen that?
So yeah, we like that show.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we saw, my husband and I were away and we watched all three or four seasons without watching anything else really in between. So that was what we would watch.
I think we just recently finished the newest season, which was probably the fourth one.
Okay. So so we just, that was what when we decided we would watch something, that we would just go to that.
Yeah, that's a fun show that I'm always, that's one of those shows that makes you talk to the TV because you're wanting to tell the kids on there to not do stuff. Don't do that. Don't do this.
It has a lot of heart.
Oh, it does, and it's well written. The actors on the show do a terrific job with the acting, and it's a good show. It's one that when the new season comes out, we jump right on it. Mm. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So you're vegan.
I am.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about that. So I have celiac. So I'm very careful with what I eat.
You're gluten-free then?
I'm gluten-free.
Yeah.
It was very reluctantly at first. I think I got diagnosed 25 years ago maybe, and it took forever to diagnose back then. They have to run you through all the stuff, and basically you eliminate everything in your diet and then figure it. It took a while. And at the time I was thinking, well, I could do a piece of pizza once in a while. That's no big deal. But over time, I kind of figured it out. But I wondered.
Have cauliflower pizza.
Oh my gosh, there's so many options.
Crust. Yeah, now you can.
So many options.
Yeah. But I remember hearing this woman who's on The View, and she had been. She's no longer on The View, but she was on The View. I think her first name was Elizabeth, but she had been on Survivor.
Yeah.
That was how. Did you probably know, because I'm sure people with celiac disease.
He was one of the first ones, I think, that celebrity-wise that I remember hearing that had that issue. Yeah, talked about it.
So she said she discovered that she had a celiac, because when she was on Survivor, she couldn't eat anything that had gluten. There was nothing to eat except for the most basic of foods, and she felt so much better. And so that's how it started to realize, maybe it's the things I'm eating that are making me feel bad.
I felt at the time, I felt so bad. I didn't know how bad I was feeling until I got better. And then like now, if I get cross-contaminated or I get a little bit of gluten, I mean, it feels so bad, where back then that was just life. I didn't even realize that I was feeling that bad, which is, my son has it as well. And he's 22. He was diagnosed about a year and a half ago, and he's doing so much better than what I did. I was closer to 30 when I got diagnosed, but he grew up eating what I was eating, so he probably had it, he didn't have that period where he was just completely miserable. We were able to kind of figure it out fairly quickly with him.
That's good, because it can be it's very serious. It's a very serious thing. It's only 1-2% of the population has it, but a lot of people, just to be clear with your audience, gluten intolerance, like if you feel a little bad after is not necessarily celiac.
Hopefully it's not.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
But you're right. It's different because celiac, autoimmune disorder. Gluten intolerance is more of an allergy. Similar to I would probably not to the extent like as a peanut allergy would be. Those are usually kind of severe, but kind of similar to that in that you could probably be okay if you just get a tiny cross-contamination, or if you've got celiac, even that little bit, it can mess you up.
Yeah.
It can mess you up. And it weakens you to the point that you end up getting other illnesses because your immune system's compromised. So I don't know. Nobody, everybody's going, thank you for explaining all this stuff that we don't care about.
I remember the first time I met somebody with celiac. It was on a TV movie I did called A Woman Hunted, and she just sort of said, "Oh no, I have celiac," and I didn't know what that was, and that was the early 90s.
Yeah, it was. They thought they had me with Crohn's disease for a long time, and then eventually they got to the point where they figured out it was celiac. No big deal now. There's so many options, but 25 years ago, not a lot of options out there. Yeah, it was more difficult. So anyway, I brought all that up because you're vegan, and I was curious, do you run into issues, where you're in situations where you have a difficult time finding something to eat, or are we to the point now where being vegan not that big a deal?
I've been vegetarian since I was 14, and I've been vegan for over 10 years. And I never run into an issue because I always bring food with me. I always prepare. I don't like being hungry. And so I always have food with me. I bring my full food to the set, so I don't have to bother the craft service and everything. And I pretty much, and also, most foods are vegan. I mean, we tend to put dairy for your audience. Eating vegan means that you don't eat anything that came from a living being, anything that has a mother. So I wouldn't eat even honey or gelatin, because those come from animals. The gelatin comes from the hoof of a bovine or a horse, and of course honey comes from a bee. So a lot of things. And dairy is a big one, and meat is, and eggs. And those are things like, if you eat a lot of nuts, seeds, grains, beans, and, nuts, grains, and fruit and vegetables, you're good. And that's a lot. I mean, in fact, our diet is very broad, because we eat a lot of beans, and there's many kinds of beans, whereas meat, Americans eat maybe 4 types of meat at the most, and they generally just maybe will have 2, like chicken and beef. And we have all sorts of beans that we can eat, all sorts of vegetables and fruit and nuts. And so and of course, if you want replacements, dairy, if you go to the supermarket, you'll see that there's 1 cow's milk, maybe there's goat's milk, and some iterations of low fat, 2%. But in the plant milk aisle, you will have almond, cashew, hemp, rice, flax. I don't recommend flax though. I did try it. Just tasted yucky. But
I usually go almond for my milk.
Yes, and oat is. We just started doing oat because we here in California, we have a drought. So I didn't want to. There's always Michael. It's hard to be a person with values in the world. You kind of have to sometimes do a trade-off. Like, okay, almonds are great, but they're also a little water consumptive, and so I think I'll pick oats, but it's hard.
I know, it's tough, and it seems like it gets more difficult every day, to make those choices and just to be aware.
Well, the good thing is that, as my sister says, you don't have to be perfect. You just make a choice that is based in a value instead of not having any values at all. And so oat milk is and almond milk. I like almond milk too, and soy milk is also very healthy. I know a lot of people are afraid of soy milk.
We don't do soy too much because my wife's allergic to soy.
Okay, yes, it is an allergen, along with shellfish, eggs, and peanuts. It's a high allergen food, so that's a good reason to stay away.
We're that I always say we're that couple that you don't want to invite to dinner.
You bring your own food. Yeah,
we'll bring our own.
I always feel bad because people go, what can we do to make a food? And all I say is, really, all you have to do is just take the cheese off and just give me vegetables. Make sure you do, and I'm happy. Beans, rice, whole grains, nuts, seeds. I mean, we have so much to choose from, but unfortunately, the way Americans cook, we don't really realize how many choices there are.
Because I know you're very athletic, and that you did, you've done swimming and the kind of the Ironman events. How does being vegetarian or vegan, how does that affect you as far as recovery and, getting enough protein to perform athletically?
I am better as a vegan, and I recover really, really well. The studies show that people who eat a whole food plant-based diet recover faster than those who eat inflammatory foods like dairy and meat. Yeah, for sure, because they're inflammatory. They're also harder to digest. And a note about dairy. I have a podcast called Switch for Good.
Yeah,
where
I was going to ask you about it. I was like, fellow podcaster, I was going to bring it up.
We interview a lot of doctors and nutritionists. So if I sound a little wonky, it's because I've learned a lot from them. But dairy is an excretion from another species that was meant for a cow. So humans, there's no species on the planet who drinks the milk of another species, much less milk after they're have been weaned. So really, milk is not, as from a cow or a goat, is not supposed to be for humans. It's supposed to bring a 75-pound calf to a 600-pound heifer in a matter of months. And we don't want all that. So it's highly inflammatory and allergenic too. A lot of people do have dairy, lactose. They have intolerance to the.
I've got that. That was the before I knew I had celiac. That's what I noticed I was having trouble with. Well,
I think, Michael, you're probably a healthier person because of your sensitivity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would weigh 500 pounds if it wasn't for having celiac.
Yeah. It's good to have boundaries because they give us freedom within those boundaries. Having a choice of being able to eat everything is a prison because you end up feeling terrible for one thing.
You got to have a lot of willpower, which with food, especially when I was younger, I did not have.
And most Americans, it's hard because a lot of the foods are processed, especially the processed foods, they're drugs. They are formulated to hit our bliss point like a drug. And so, yeah, I recommend, I'm also a health coach and I have private clients where I help them get into healthier habits. And one of the things I really encourage people is don't use willpower as your main weapon to deal with food. Use the environment. So get it out of your environment. Don't even be tempted. Don't even drive past on the way to work that McDonald's. Take another route if you have to. Make it easier on yourself because those foods are drugs and they have a very.
I love that and you're right, because you get in, and I've done this myself many times. You get in those patterns where you'll eat a healthy dinner and you're full, but you have to have a dessert. So you end up kind of messing yourself up because you then eat something sweet on top of this dinner that has already filled you up. But if you take all that stuff out of the house, you're at least making it a little more difficult. If you got to drive somewhere to get a dessert, maybe you won't do that. So that's something that I've done, in the past. I get that stuff out of the house because then it's not as tempting.
You are exactly right. And people feel bad about themselves. They say, I'm a weak person. I'm a bad person because I'm eating that stuff. And no, you need to realize it's not you. Our biological urge as humans is to eat the most calorie dense foods so we can survive. Yeah. Nowadays, we don't need to eat the most calorie dense foods to survive because A, they're everywhere, and B, we don't really, we don't use as much energy as we used to when we were hunting for our food or foraging. So we need to recognize that our biology doesn't mesh with these processed foods. And so it's not our fault, but we need to, so therefore, instead of trying to use willpower where we'll lose most of the time and in the long run, we need to develop habits so that we don't even have it there. It's not tempting us, and have substitutions that are healthier. So you could freeze bananas and put them in a blender and add maybe some nuts or even nut butter, and it'll taste like peanut butter ice cream.
Yeah,
you can,
it's pretty good.
Strawberry ice cream, or there's things you can do. So have that there. It's so much easier. And you're right. If you really, 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 really want something, then drive and go get it. And then, and get what you can eat then, and do not put it in your fridge for later. Just eat it right then.
Yeah.
And then,
I mean, that's pretty good advice. How do you do with caffeine? Are you a coffee drinker? Do you have that vice?
No, I do not drink coffee. I do not, my only vice, I struggled with eating disorders when I was from 16 to 28. So I knew that, I thought I was highly addictive personality, which I don't really think I was. But so I never did any drugs or alcohol or anything or coffee in my 20s and 30s and 40s because I was afraid that I would become an alcoholic or a caffeine addict. And I thought I just need to keep my stuff, concentrate my willpower on food. So I never got into it and decided as an adult later on that, I prefer not to be addicted to coffee. So
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I know a little bit about the eating disorders, and that's let's say a technique that a lot of people that have struggled with that, I think, use. They avoid things that can be addictive, even though most people would consider caffeine not that big a deal, but they do it as a way to kind of control their environment and not, give themselves triggers that they at least think that it might.
Yeah, I didn't want to have another thing I had to give up. So I never smoked either, anything like that, just because I knew, well, eventually I'm going to have to give it up if I want to be healthy. So
one more thing you got to worry about. What's harder for you? Is it the running, the biking, or the swimming?
So you're talking about triathlons.
Yeah.
And well, now the running is because I had knee surgery about 15 years ago. So I have not run.
It's getting older. It's no fun.
And I did I did run a lot. And so I wore down my knees. So I don't run, but swimming is my favorite. And I love swimming. So I would say that out of the two that I can still do, cycling is harder for me to get out and do, and swimming, you could always get me there.
You can always do. I don't run as much as I used to. I still run several times a week, but I had a few years ago, I was really into the running, and I set this goal. I was going to run 2,000 miles in a year.
Oh,
so
wow,
I thought,
good for you.
That's a good goal. So I worked on it all year.
What does that divide up to? I mean,
it's like, it was something like a little less than 6 miles a day, 5 and something a day. And I worked on
7 days a week.
For 7 days. I was dedicated to it. And I got all the way to December the 30th, and I had 13 miles left. So I was at 1,987 miles. And I was like, well, I'm going to end the year, my last day of the year, I'm going to run a half marathon. And that'll be the big finish to my 2,000 mile run. So December 31st, I woke up, stomach flu.
Oh my God. So you couldn't finish it. I couldn't finish it. And it messed me up so bad. I didn't run again for several months. You mean that you hadn't finished it, or that you were just overtrained? You've done so much.
Well, I probably a little overtrained too, but I was beat to death. But just the disappointment of not finishing.
Oh no, but it's such a more
months.
Interesting story, Michael.
I think so too now, because that's been years ago. Now I can look back and think that's a pretty good story.
Oh my God. And you're the same. I mean, we all know that if you didn't have the stomach flu, you would have done that 13 miles. So it's
I had it.
To me, it's, it's sort of like being on, what is that one of those singing songs. And you never remember who won. It's the second place person that always seemed to get really famous.
Right?
Successful.
It is.
Because they were just as good. They just somehow didn't.
They just
didn't win.
For whatever
reason. Yeah.
They just didn't win. And it's a motivator, but it also taught me that I don't really want to run 2,000 miles in a year. That's too much.
Well, you did.
Now I shoot for like 20 miles a week now. I think that's pretty good.
You need to take a day off too. I hope you take.
Oh yeah, I separate it, but it's, let's say, about 3 times a week I'll run.
Good. That's
maybe 4 if it's a good week and I'm doing pretty good. But I separate that out because same thing. It just beats you to death. And I was like, what am I training so hard for? I don't know.
Yeah, I learned there's a difference for being fit doesn't always mean you're healthy, because you can actually overtrain and all your numbers, your immune system will go down and things like that if you're overtrained. So it's good that you've given yourself.
I don't, and that's true too. I don't get sick nearly as much as I did that year because I was just so exhausted all the time. Plus, I was probably a pain in the butt to be around.
Yeah, you always had to go off for your run.
I was worn out all the time. Now, I will say though, eating wise, because I was burning so many calories, best year I've ever had.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's funny though, because I trained for a lot of long swims, the 11 miles, 14 mile swims,
Yeah.
and then the Hawaii Ironman, which is an Ironman where you swim 2.5 miles, you bike 112 and you run a marathon. And my weight didn't really change that much. Like exercise doesn't change my weight. Maybe it'll go down
Probably a
5
good thing.
pounds, but I don't become like emaciated, and I also don't tend to eat a ton. So it's kind of odd. And really, for those listening, is if you want to have a healthy life and maintain a weight, diet is so much more important than exercise. You're exactly right. You can actually, if your diet's dialed in, you hardly have to exercise to get for a lot of people below, to your ideal weight. But if you exercise like crazy and your diet is just terrible, you won't. You
can gain some muscle, but that fat's still going to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't get rid of it without getting your diet straight. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, it's been difficult on a lot of us.
Yeah.
We held out for as long as we could, and then we're like, all right, just give me the donut. Let's just go. Of course, I wouldn't eat a donut, but they do have gluten-free donuts now, though.
They sure do. They have gluten-free everything. No,
I know it's not. I'll tell you the one that was a bad situation for me is double stuffed Oreos.
Oh yes, we vegans can eat those too.
Boy, I had that's great because that was a big weakness of mine. Years ago, and then I couldn't eat them, so I got eliminated, and now there's gluten-free ones out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, they're so fake; they don't have any animals in them, so vegans can eat them. Yeah.
That's a.
Do you eat them by pulling them apart and licking the inside and then eating them? Oh, I do.
No, but now I do eat them, and now I eat them with almond milk, and they're still pretty great.
Dunk them?
I dunk them. They're pretty great. It's just one of those. That is definitely one that does not stay in the house.
Yeah, smart.
Because I know if I buy a package, I'm not going to eat one or two.
Exactly. I know we all fool ourselves into thinking I'll just have a couple, but let me tell you, people, you never do just have a couple.
No. So cookies and chips. You don't eat a couple. Another good
tip if you live with people in the house who you can't force them not to eat the same way you do is put the things that are really unhealthy in the very highest shelf to the back or the very lowest shelf to the bottom, just so they're out of your sight, and put really healthy things on the counter.
That's a good idea.
How humans were biologically wired to not use energy if we don't have to. We will just that extra step of having to get on your tippy toes and kind of grab the Oreos can often help us not get them, or put them in the freezer. And if you don't want to wait till they thaw, you might be like, I'm not going to wait till they. So there are tricks to do that, but the best thing is to just not have them.
Have them. I always laugh. The kids are all grown now, but when they were growing up, they would come in to see what we're cooking for dinner or something, and they would ask, "Is that real or gluten-free?" I was like, it's always going to be gluten-free. Well, Alexandra, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'd talk your ear off about the health issues, but I know we got to wrap up. But a couple of things before we do. Let's start here. What is there anything that you're currently working on that we can kind of keep an eye out for?
Well, thank you so much for asking. I have 2 movies coming out that I shot in 2021. One is called Tethered, which is a horror film, and the other one, I think it's coming out.
Are you the killer?
No, I can't tell you. Wait, I can't tell you. And the second one is called Baby Steps, and that's a sequel to another movie I did called Say Yes a few years ago. And then I have my podcast, which everyone is welcome to download. It's Switch for the digit 4 Good. Switch for Good is the name of it, and my co-host is the silver medal Olympian Dotsie Bausch. And she won a silver at the London Games in cycling. And we talk all things health and well-being, especially when it comes.
How did you hook up with her for a podcast?
I wanted to do a podcast. I'm a really better team player than doing things alone. So I had actually talked about it with 2 other folks separately, and they just didn't have the drive that I did.
Yeah.
It's like pulling them along. And when I met Dotsie, we were on a panel about athletes and veganism, and I saw her as a type A, driven, passionate. So I called her up and said, hey, and she also struggled with an eating. She had anorexia for a long time. So I called her up and said, do you want to do a podcast about health and, disordered eating and how people can just feel better about themselves? And she said yes. So we put it under the banner of her nonprofit, Switch for Good, and it's done really, really, really well.
Oh, that's terrific. That's terrific. Yeah, I saw that that you had done a podcast, and I was mad at myself because I was like, how did you miss that? Prepping, you're terrible. But I'll be listening because that's you cover a lot of topics I think that are near and dear to my heart. So I'll definitely be listening. So, okay, last thing, where can we find you on social media?
Okay, well, I have a website. I know that's old school, but I know that one for sure. It's alexandrapaul.com.
It's pretty well done. Do you do your own website?
My friend Vietli Vu did it. Boy, she had a fan website back in the 90s, and my manager said, this young woman, she was 18 at the time. She has a fan site. Maybe you should contact her and ask her to make it
good job.
work with her. And I was like, website? What's that? Oh, I'm so a Luddite. Anyway, so she's one of my closest friends, and she does a great job on my site. I struggle to keep up with it because I also post on my social media, but I'm not great at social media. So I have a Facebook page. I think it's Alexandra Paul Official. I have a Twitter page, Alexandra _Paul, I think.
Yep.
Is that right? And
I think that's right. Yep.
My Instagram is Alexandra _actress.
Yeah, very good. I'm guessing that maybe you've got an underscore because isn't there like an athlete or something that's named Alexandra Paul?
There's a skater, a Canadian skater. A double skater. And and I once met an Alexandra Paul here in Santa Monica. So there are others. It's always weird when there's people with your exact same.
I know.
Michael Walls. There's
so many of us out there. Well, thank you so much, Alexandra. This has been the best. You got to come back. I've got so much more to talk to you about.
I'd love to come back, Michael. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, you're so welcome. Okay, hold on one second. All right, so that was Alexandra Paul, who is amazing. I'm such a fan of hers, and not just for the acting. I just think she is such a passionate person, and she's an activist for all the right reasons. Just terrific. Make sure that you check out her podcast, Switch for Good podcast. And I'm sure it's available on all the different platforms, or you can go to her website and that'll point you right to it. It's just amazing. There's so many things to talk about with her. I didn't get to talk about a lot of the things that I've seen her in that I absolutely loved. Spy Hard, Dragnet, 8 Million Ways to Die, Sharknado 4. I'm such a fan of the tongue-in-cheek nature of Sharknado movies, and she was in 4 with some of the Baywatch cast, including David Hasselhoff. And we didn't even get to talk about the fact that she was kind of the love interest of David's on the show. So we'll definitely have to have her back on, because just a big fan. Well, she had an appearance on Mad Men too that I thought she was really good in. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again this week. Appreciate that. Definitely don't take that for granted. If you haven't done so yet, we could use the help on our YouTube channel, MeisterCon Pod. We're trying to grow those subscription numbers so we can continue to bring you just wonderful guests. So we appreciate that. If you could subscribe. You can find all 350 or so episodes, audio and video of the podcast on our website, meistercon.com. There's a fun, geeky, well-written blog from Brett. I think you'll really enjoy that. If we're doing anything in studio, if we're going on location, if we're covering conventions, all that will be on the website, meistercon.com. Thank you guys so much. Until next time, bye, everybody.